Yeah, video number two here. I apologize. I got a little too wordy on the first one, but yeah, there's five chapters here and a lot of material to cover. So I just wanted to just take a little bit of time and say a couple things about the the moral aspects in these chapters. I'm not going to have a lot of time to really get into it, but I mentioned it earlier. One of the things that really made me think was in chapter two when McPhee talked about um, games, and it made me think of my childhood. A lot of times when we played sports when I was young, it would be at recess or after school, and there was nothing official about it. It would be a group of maybe, 8 to 10 kids, and we would get together and we would play baseball or we would play football. And oftentimes, it, the way we played was very modified from the official rules. And so I do kind of agree with the argument that he made that that doesn't really change the game because we considered it football or we considered it baseball. But one thing I do definitely remember is that oftentimes when we played those games with modified rules, there would be conflict, and the conflict would come in where, you know, we would feel that we were slighted because the rules weren't super clear. And that really made me think that that moral aspect of sports, and when two competing teams or individuals go into a sport and there's an agreement that you're going to compete with each other, the voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles, there definitely is a significant element that we come into that with an understanding that it's going to be ethical and it's going to be moral. In other words, call it what you want, fair. That the rules are going to be applied fairly to both sides, and that really does make a strong moral aspect, I believe, to sports. Some other things that I thought were interesting. At one point, I thought about the question, is striving to win a moral value? Um, and, that's an interesting thing to think about. Another thing that I think was interesting um, is just the whole idea, and I thought about this a number of times through the reading, is in what way is the moral nature of sport related to us as human beings being image bearers of God. And I definitely think that there's a connection there. Um, you know, Sport is something that is invented by human beings, but even the structural nature of sport, because we are created by God and the things that operate in this world were created by God. I think that's really a reason why there's a moral nature, because as image bearers, we operate the way that God created us to. Um, Another thing I really thought about is how do the cultural influences affect us as Christians, because there definitely are cultural influences on sport. And I talked a little bit about that in the other video, how I think you can see that even in different geographic areas of our own country. Obviously, in the United States, I mean, if I'm not sure if there's any Canadians in this class, but if you've ever talked with Canadians or Europeans about sports, they definitely have a little different view than Americans do. And I think as Christians, it's good for us to ask those questions and to really think about, how does the culture affect us, and do we really think about the moral implications of the choices we make with sports? And I alluded to this a little bit, but even like the amount of time and energy we put into it, really that's a moral choice. And, a lot of times I think we just really go along with our culture around us and say, that this is a good idea. And we don't necessarily think about it a whole lot. And I think it's important for us to think about, how are we different, and should we be evaluating what we do with sports as Christians differently than the culture, and not necessarily just doing whatever is done around us. There's a lot of other thoughts in there too. I thought about the differences, when I thought about my childhood and how we interacted in sports and the differences now. I think youth today experience sports in a much more organized fashion than when I was young, and maybe that's better. And maybe it's not. I don't know. It's just different. And I would think that probably the ethics and the morals that come out of that and that kids learn are a little bit different too. Like I said, I think a lot of times we had to work through conflict and some of those types of things because of the fact that our sports weren't super organized. Today I think the things are different. Maybe there's different things that kids need to work through, and maybe there's different ethics and morals that come out of that. But anyway, I'm going to try to address more of these things in the discussion questions, and I hope that you can persist in your reading. It's going to take a little bit of time to read through those 5 chapters. I would recommend probably trying to sit down and read through all 5 if you can in a fairly close amount of time, and then, like I said, go back and read the intro to kind of review and kind of try to put together your thoughts and make some posts on the discussion board. It will be pretty much the same as last time. Make your own post, respond to my question, and then respond to some of your classmates or a couple of your classmates. And you're gonna have to be on it a little bit better this week because it's 1 week instead of a week and a half.